that forward spending for the war gets realized into the present, that's when you start to see the last move in gold really take off. And for us, that was, that was some $250 to $900 in that period. So if you think gold does well during war, while it is a barometer of fear, perhaps the secondary fear is, oh my God, what have we done? Now we're going to have to pay for this. And that's the 1975 to 1980 movement in gold, which takes us up another 200% in a matter of years. So we're not even there yet.
Wednesday, February 25th, 2026, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today I have Peter Carlin back. Peter co-wrote A Pocketbook of Gold with Jim Sinclair. You can find a PDF link for this book below. It's only 25 bucks. It's really hard to get the original hard copy. It's almost as good as gold, this book, in terms of price. And Peter, today we're going to talk a little bit about a section in the book of gold being a barometer of fear and confidence and not inflation.
Yes. What I wanted to present here today is gold in the context of the Ukrainian war, and using our charts that we have to show you exactly how the barometer of fear and confidence works. My contention is that the price of gold, as you can see expressed in the charts, will actually show you the operational history of the Ukrainian war to date and how it's unfolding. There are other factors, of course. You know, we do have the situation with sovereign debt. We do have the unfunded liabilities that are now skyrocketing to 250, trillion in the U.S., unpayable debt, all sorts of other problems. But my real point here is to show you how this barometer of confidence works almost in real time, and how paying attention to the operational history of the war, not only in the past, but going forward, and as you work every day in the market, if you trade, or if you're worried about a position or an investment, the things that you should take into account and what you can see by it. So that means that what I'm talking about is, when we talk about confidence, and we talk about it as a barometer of confidence, but confidence in what? Well, in the prospect of future existential security is the main thing. So whether people want to admit it or not, the Ukrainian war has had a tremendous impact on the price of gold, as I'm sure everybody watching this show knows. And the other reason why is, during the prosecution of this war, it's revealed the limitations of NATO's power quite starkly, at least in its first non-nuclear iteration, which we hope lasts, as well as the political degradation of the concept of NATO as well. I mean, the EU is the front point geostrategically of NATO and is in a complete political disintegration. So part of that degradation of NATO power has been founded in the hubristic belief that sanctions and military power could lead to a quick collapse of Russia. That was the thesis which this war was founded on. Sanctions and a quick movement to get Ukraine into NATO, or sanctions on its own first, and then a military posturing within the alliance would get an immediate back down from Russia, or an economic collapse, which would allow NATO to move forward from its positions into Ukraine proper, and therefore establish a foothold there, which would more or less, whether it was a year, 5, 10, or 20 years, be a checkmate against Russia. But it was a very bad miscalculation. Also, the notion that Russia's military was backward, archaic, and ineffectual has been proven drastically wrong. That failure to see Russia as a technologically advanced, in terms of warfare, and adept at strategic shifts was a cardinal mistake that NATO made, and that everybody involved in the neocons who were behind this both in Europe and in America. And also, the failure to anticipate the development of war was another strategic miscalculation of a calculus that NATO seemed incapable of either anticipating, or that they thought that Russia would not be able to adapt to. And as we all know now, the limited use of armored tanks in the war, the kind of ineffectualness of the Wunderwaffen, the Leopards, the Challengers, even the Abrams tanks, that would be rendered more or less of limited use because of the very rapid pivot by the Russian military forces towards drone warfare and the movement away from tanks itself, which it suffered great losses of too, realizing that they were ineffectual and coming up with a whole new strategic, basis for how they would prosecute the war, which we're seeing now unfold, especially in the past 18 months. The small teams of 3 to 15 maximum going out with drones, with technology, and changing the calculus of the war. And the other one part of the calculus of the war that NATO somehow missed, which I for the life of me cannot understand, is the fact that Leopards and Challengers and tanks like that, they needed to have to work with air support, and land support as well. And since there was no real ability to control the totality of the air corridors within Ukraine, it kind of rendered them ineffectual. So what I want to show, though, is we're here to talk about gold. What I want to say is that there is a relationship between these strategic, military, political impediments within the Western military NATO alliance. And I used to write every year for NATO on the military demand for oil. So it is an organization that I've been involved with through the House of Commons in the UK, and through the select committees that used to ask for, reports on military demand for oil. As you know, I come from the oil markets as well as the gold markets, but a long period of my life was in oil refined products trading, and the effects that, I was in the pits during both Gulf Wars. So, where we had magnanimous moves in oil and 200+% volatility in the options pit. So that's just my personal background. But if we want to take a look at some of these charts, we can actually start to go through this and see where we are. So why don't we go to the first one and we can have a look.
Yeah, can I just add one thing in relationship to Russia and Ukraine, apart from the moves that we're going to look at in gold in relationship to the prosecution of the war, is the fact that the West froze Russia's assets. That's also had a huge impact on fear. I would say other countries now fear that their reserves might be frozen, so they've been starting to buy gold.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody who can disagree now that this has to be one of the greatest own goals in history.
Yeah.
It shows you again the hubris, the belief that at certain policy levels, the flexing of economic muscle will have no repercussion.
Yeah.
And that's been proven another drastic miscalculation. So
let's go to the first
so
chart.
the fear runs through both sides.
Yeah. So there we go.
Okay, so here we can see at the very beginning of the war. I hope those are readable to people. So we can see that the initial spike up with the Russian invasion comes, and then we see the movement towards Kiev, and then we have a halt while negotiations go on between the two sides. And then we have a pullback of Russian forces away from Kiev in early 2022, which was wrongly interpreted as a sign of weakness in the Russian military position. It was an attempt to project power while indicating an openness towards negotiated settlement, which was in progress. As a matter of fact, we know from both the Ukrainian and Russian side that they were more or less breaking out the champagne. And then we have the much vaunted, if disputed, but from many people said that, Boris Johnson intervened and said, no, there's not going to be any negotiated settlement. We are going to prosecute this war, and we are going to go after, NATO is going to go after Russian troops positioned in the four oblast in Donbass, Zaporizhia regions. So we first get this down movement, which is those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 red bars. Please remember you're looking at a monthly chart. Also disregard the top left-hand corner. These are the main price structure. The main price there is from a few days ago. So this was when I was making these charts up. Has nothing to do with the price of gold today, which is 52.33 as we speak. Silver up another 4.5% at 90.9, almost $91. But we can see these months are coming out here, and we can see how the market is coming off. It's seeing that war is going to be avoided, war is going to be averted. And then all of a sudden, we start to get a movement out. Now, I don't actually have this in front of me. I have to remember what I wrote here. So, right. You have also, yes, the Ukraine counterattack in Kharkiv and Kherson, which was proving somewhat successful. And those are all those down movements there. And then we have the turnaround when we start to get, Russia begins drone warfare, infrastructure attacks. The leopards, which everybody vaunted was so necessary, have largely been neutralized. So that turns the thing, and you see the big bar up in green right there that changes the disposition of the war, and it starts to go over a period of months. And then after that, we have the great Ukrainian counteroffensive of 2023, which is finally by Zaluzhny called a stalemate, which is more or less a code word for failure. And gold certainly agrees. And right there, we can see what happens when Zaluzhny says that. We get the first big bar moving up. We go over 2,000, and we have never come back. That I think shows you how gold is a barometer of fear and confidence in existential security. Once that movement had been defined in the quote unquote stalemate, which is more or less, Zaluzhny throwing in the towel, saying the counteroffensive has been lost. This is not going to work. And if we look to the right of that picture, we can see that that marks that fantastic move up that you're seeing. Somewhere in between that right-hand side now, a little to the right of the last commentary part after October 23, Nov, Dis, we calm down for the year. January, we take off to the moon again, and the whole thing starts to move out. Now we have the loss of Bakhmut has occurred. By the time we get towards March 2024, Avdiivka has fallen to Russia. I think you're going to find that if you go into March 2024, we get a 10% upward move in a month. Now, for all you gold, silver traders out there, you'll go everyday occurrence. But for gold, that's not really the case. Gold is, a much firmer, slower moving market, but still a great barometer. And so we can see as that unfolds, I don't know if you want to move towards 2024 now. Part of these two charts will overlap. Yep, there we've got, sorry, excuse me again to read what I've got here. Ukraine drone attacks on Crimea. That's right, happened there in March 24, but they have almost no result.
Yeah.
Kharkiv power failure, and Russia starts to unload on the energy systems of Ukraine. And now we start the monthly move up and up and up. Also, March 2024, if we look in there, that's when Avdiivka falls. By the time we get to, August 2024, we have the Kursk invasion, which really starts to look now, which really starts to look now that it was just a crowd pleaser. There didn't seem to be any real thought behind it, other than to say, look what we can do, keep the funding going, keep the funding going. But strategically, it bewildered everybody in the military sphere, including the Russians themselves, saying, but you know, you're going to spend manpower to invade Kursk. What for? It has no strategic efficacy whatsoever, and you're just going to be trapped there. So they invade Kursk. They go a few kilometers in. It produces absolutely no results. It's strategically meaningless, and it looks like just an attempt to keep the money rolling. And then before long, we just we just roll back. So after that, we've got we start to move into 2025. I think that's a new chart. I don't know if you want to have a look at 2025.
New chart. Okay.
Yeah, the
Well,
2025 one.
yeah.
Yeah. So as we move into here, we can see where Kursk was, right? We get the 14.5% gain in 2 months after Kursk becomes a failure. And then, and then we get the massive drone assaults that begin. And if we look at this, pull back and look at it in its totality, we can see 11 months of upside for gold in a row.
Yeah.
Um,
And
it's
Peter, sorry to
Sure.
interrupt you. And to me, you said in the beginning that there are those 7 months that gold was down, and people in the West were saying, "Oh, Russia doesn't, they can't win this." But I remember listening to people in the alternative saying that Russia didn't want to. They started this, they call it a special military operation. They started it to kind of not to go and conquer the whole of the Ukraine, but to get Ukraine to negotiate to that Minsk agreement, and for NATO to agree not to have Ukraine join NATO and so on. But we were told in the West that Russia invaded Ukraine because they wanted to take over it. So that's why I guess it looked like the Russians were like not doing well, but they didn't really want to invade it and destroy the country. But to me now, listening to you, it seems to me that not just gold has not just reacted to the Russian victories and the defeat for Ukraine and NATO, it's also reacting to the fact that we in the West are like plowing all this treasure into this war, and it's going to be end up being for nothing. And and gold is telling us that you need to get out of these fiat currencies because it's
Yes, and this is why while we're still engaged in this conflict to an extent, and also while we develop this horrific situation that we're going up against Iran. And I would remind people that not just because of the movement into Afghanistan by the Soviet troops in 1980 and early 1980, but as well the period from the end of the Paris peace process with Vietnam and the last, more or less, the effective withdrawal of the United States from Vietnam. Um, when all that forward spending for the war gets realized into the present, that's when you start to see the last move in gold really take off. And for us, that was that was some $250 to 900 in that period. So if you think gold does well during war, while it is a barometer of fear, perhaps the secondary fear is, oh my God, what have we done? Now we're going to have to pay for this. And that's the 1975 to 1980 movement in gold, which takes us up another 200% in a matter of years. So we're not even there yet,
yeah.
sadly.
Do you
um,
think, sorry to interrupt you, do you think the
sorry.
United States, NATO, or the West are gonna make the same mistake into thinking they can easily uh, neutralize, so to speak, Iran and put in a new regime? Do you think they're also overestimating their power?
I believe Trump has got himself into a corner that he doesn't know how to get out of. That's what I think. Um, I believe that the regime change operation in Iran is something that they're going to attempt. It's perhaps secondary for some people, primary for others, is that it takes out a critical nodal point for BRICS. With the movement in the Panama Canal, the Supreme Court decision out of Panama in the past few days, what happened in Venezuela, what's going on with Greenland, and then the movement into Iran, you can see that what's strategically happening is that the United States is letting Europe go more or less. It doesn't care. The empire, such as it's known, if anybody wants to, debate all day on whether the United States is an empire or whatever, we can go down that route forever. Is pulling back to its critical dynamics of Middle East oil, hemispheric intent, to control the Western Hemisphere, the Donroe Doctrine, and then gradually to pivot towards the Pacific, where the main thrust of the next 100 years is likely to be. So I think that the plan for regime change in Iran is serious. I still believe the old Halford Mackinder grand strategy, Zbigniew Brzezinski chessboard of trying to control the Caspian and trying to control Central Asia is still in the mindset of the State Department. I think it's completely misguided. But I would say that if we see that there's a regime change in Iran, there may not be an immediate reaction by Russia or China per se. But if the oil stops flowing, or it looks like this is an invitation to station troops in the Bandar Abbas region, Karg Island, the Straits, you could see a counter move by Russia that would go in towards Baku and Azerbaijan, and Armenia would be neutralized as well. The counter position will be to take over Caspian oil. If the United States believes that it is going to shut off China from oil deliveries through the Straits of Hormuz, through a defeat of Iran militarily or regime change operation that will then give them the political leverage over the disposition of crude oil movements through the Straits of Hormuz, the counteract will be Russia and China together moving to control the Caspian. So that's where we are right now. I mean,
Yeah.
how this plays out, I don't know. So it would behoove probably the Chinese especially to fight this war in Iran now, or perhaps in terms of what's the best way to put it? In terms of a war of attrition, which now NATO has engaged in and lost in Ukraine, if it could engage Western forces in another attrited war in Iran, which you're not going to do easily. You're going to have to mobilize the entire society of America and the West to do it. But if you were to try and do it, then it would be good strategy probably from Russia and China to bog the West down there
Yeah.
and then move immediately on Taiwan,
Yeah.
which I would like to say one thing,
Sorry.
that if the Chinese and the Chinese language press has told everybody that this latest move on Iran, as well as the moves in Panama and Venezuela, have given China all the green light it needs to take Taiwan.
Yeah.
That's how they view it.
There's a saying by Napoleon Bonaparte. He said, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. So I guess Russia and China will just let the US and the West get bogged down in Iran, and that's better for them.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of been here before in 46 and
Yeah.
in, 1918, 1920.
Yeah.
Um,
And
how you,
The Soviets got bogged down in Afghanistan, and then some
yes,
years later, the empire collapsed.
right, right. So I don't know what the US militarily can do um, other than bomb the country and then try and run a regime change regime. But remember that if you get a regime change in the Iran body politic, the ability of the central government in Tehran to project force to every region of Iran. What I was saying was that the ability of Tehran to project force throughout every region in the country, especially within the Shiite south of the country, is limited. You may find out that yes, you can have a regime change operation in Tehran. Does that allow you to mobilize the Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is no longer the Revolutionary Guard Corps? Does that the RGC? Does that allow you to create a new army? Are we going to send Schwarzkopf's dad back in, who was the person who trained, the Shah's previous one? Also, he was the head of the New Jersey State Troopers for all you history buffs out there. Stormin' Norman's dad was the person who trained the Shah's army and police
Oh,
force. Savak, yes.
yeah,
In
I
case
didn't
people
know
don't
that. Yeah,
remember about Stormin' Norman
yeah.
Schwarzkopf, he grew up in Iran, and
Okay,
he with his dad and spoke Farsi and
I see.
Arabic.
So you also sent me some stuff about U.S. Consumer
Right.
Michigan Consumer
Okay.
Sentiment. You
So
want to
a
look
couple
at
of things
that?
I want to go through there. This
Yeah,
is the confidence level on the domestic scale. And I
yeah,
think we should take a look at this. It's absolutely fascinating chart. This is US consumer confidence, you know, um, and consumer sentiment. And this chart, literally, if you run this thing all the way back to the 1950s, it would move between, say, 99 or 100 and like 60 at its lowest. We're looking at all-time lows in US consumer confidence. This is another thing pushing gold forward. The consumer is tapped out. We have a situation where if you look at the housing market now, everybody's predicting low single digit growth. Of that, buyers in the real estate market in the US are hesitating, they're pulling back, they're becoming very concerned. This is going to slow economic activity in the US. So we have that going on there. The buying is stalling out there. I don't know. I hope I haven't been AI'd, but we're seeing, as you might be able to tell me better, in Manchester, what's going on with these disturbances, which, there's been some protests against mass immigration there that are getting out of control. We see the same thing in Minnesota. If you look at force projection in the United States, you can see how it has its limits too. Imagine what it's going to be like in Iran. So what I'm saying is you may change the government in Tehran, big deal. So what? So
yeah.
you control Iran. That's not the point. The point is, can you project power to the Gulf where the oil gets through? Can you project power to the north, to Azerbaijan, across the Aras River, to where the BTC pipeline is coming out, where the Exxon Chevron investments are? So we have a multitude of problems here. And if we stay on the oil side, as we're talking about Iran, if you go to the last chart with
Yeah.
the APIs, this is probably another big tailwind for gold. If we look at the far right-hand side of this is the API, American Petroleum Institute, crude draw, crude build, week on weeks that everybody in the oil game follows pretty closely. And you will see that massive drawdown in stocks to go off to refineries, and then the massive rebuild back probably out of the SPR. These types of chart movements that you see in extremists all the way on the right-hand side are the kind of things that you see in preparation for war. They're running hard on crude assignment to the refining systems in America to get the military mobilized. Militaries run on oil. They do
Yeah.
not run on electricity or natural gas or coal.
And
They are fuel.
the strategic reserve the U.S. has is probably, is it quite empty? Because didn't Biden sell off a lot of it?
He sold it off, but it's being rebuilt. More, perhaps even more interestingly, um, China over the past year has been taking in stockpiles that are absolutely record breaking in their amounts. Literally, you're talking almost 1 million barrels a day every day for a year. Why is everybody stockpiling everything? Critical minerals, oil. So this is all standard procedure for war preparation. So it's no surprise that we're going right back up on gold and silver. So far, we don't see anything to let us know that we're moving away from this situation. We are getting to a situation now. Now, I don't know whether it's true or not. We're getting to a quite hair-raising situation where the Russians are claiming that both Britain and France claim that they may arm Ukraine with a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
This is getting, it's completely out of control. You want a barometer of fear, this type of thing,
Yeah.
it's got the Ukrainian troops, are pretty much running out now. This is people firing missiles at each other. The average age of a Ukrainian troop now is 44 years old on the front line. And, we have this perfect storm that's being created. And sadly, there's nothing that's stopping it right now. So we're still in this run up to this Iran war, which could be coming any day now. I don't know. This is becoming more than anything part of the U.S. internal political dynamic, and whether the U.S. Trump administration, J.D. Vance, people like that, are capable of holding off those who want the green light for this war. But I fail to see what comes after the bombing campaign.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can't send troops in there like you did in Iraq, what use is it? And your book with Jim Sinclair says it's a survival manual for monetary mayhem, and I think we're getting that, but we're also getting geopolitical mayhem, which is a double whammy, I guess.
Yes, we are. We are.
Yeah.
So we have the confluence of both the international spectrum, the prosecution of the Ukraine war, which I showed you in charts, was an attempt to show you that the barometer of gold is working, functioning perfectly through the operational history, the ups and downs of the war. You can see it in the gold price. So keep your eye on oil. Keep your eye on the price of gold. Gold may tell you when peace breaks out, if it ever does. But as it looks right now, I believe there's at least an even money chance that the bombing campaign, if the US unleashes this in Iran, will result in a blockade of Taiwan by China. And I have no idea what anybody plans to do in response to that. So here we are.
Well, Peter, thank you very much for your analysis. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure the viewers appreciate it too. And I wish you a great rest of the day.
And you.
Thank you.
All the best.